Hey everybody, Chris Pugh here. I've gotten a couple of questions about maybe doing another somewhat of a rig rundown, since I've actually changed a little bit since the last time I ever went and did any kind of like rig overview of the Digico SD9 system that I've been using. And since things have been happening a little bit more lately, I haven't taken a ton of time, but I did actually just kind of want to go through and look at a few. Look at just a couple of things that I've got going on as part of this current show file. Core baseline, we've got Digico SD9. I've got things pretty customized, laid out as far as input channel positions, but for all intents, everything gets printed and comes in through. I'm actually using an SD rack with this at this time, and just a regular MADI snake. So one little interesting insight into how I'm doing that versus using the D2 or the D-Rack series is like just right here locally, just for the sake of keeping that MADI C connection as short as possible. I'm actually just using very short cables here, just a pair coming out of the desk, and then I'm using LRBs, Digico little red box, and I'm just using them as their function of converter. They're basically to convert the MADI twisted pair or MADI C protocol, just a straight regular MADI BNC. So I use that, just a regular BNC MADI snake to connect to the desk, and can run it either 48 or 96K off of that cabling infrastructure. So got that going on. All the inputs, come in on regular input channels, and then I am doing some group processing and some group to group type thing. So a lot of things will come in and then end up coming to this first set of subgroups that I'm showing right here. It's pretty much going to be impossible to read those labels off of the scribble strip deal, so I'll just kind of bring that up here on the screen. Some of this stuff is legible. So we've got good cop, bad cop, RTMOM. That's all drum stuff. So good cop, bad cop, that's my parallel path on all the close mic skins. RTMOM is round things made of metal. So that is hi-hat and overheads essentially going to that. Bass guitar, bass guitar, any bass guitar type inputs are all going to get routed here to this mono group. Guitars, which hopefully it's exactly what is going in there, and anything associated with that. Bands, anything that's not a drums, bass, or guitar hits that. So on this particular show file, that is, most of its content is keyboard related, but anything that is not associated with one of these others, that's where they're going to go. And then the two vocal group stems of VGVs, which have the option to get panned around to be able to sort of hug around the lead vocal, and then the lead vocal dry goes to is just a mono group. So this is actually, if anyone has spoken to me about some input alignment, I've got a couple other videos up on that kind of thing. This is also where most of my source alignment comes from here, because of source associations and things like input source associations, as I should say. And that's where most of this is taking place. And just because as far as things that are actually going to be on input strips or input faders, that stuff's pretty consistent across the board, whether that is merely a Digico native channel strip SD processing, or that plus a Waves insert. Honestly, on this file, there are some individual channel strips that do have some Waves inserts on them, but not as many as you might think, because a lot of that is really taking place at the group level, and also using that for various for some of their effect qualities and things like that, whether it's the actual Waves instances, or I'm using the SoundGrid ecosystem to get into some of my analog path, which I'll kind of go over here momentarily. But coming from this actual initial subgroup source, where all those sources are routed there, paging over here to these four sets of groups, which are so the first one is the stereo drum. So all those 1, 2, 3, all these drum groups get routed to this drum group. And this is also where all the drum effects returns come back too. So they all sum into here. That helps me out quite a bit with alignment protocols and procedures, being able to have them hit there versus having those effects returns come back over here. By doing it this way, I've got another throughput, and essentially that kind of helps me keep everything in time. Again, knowing me, I'm a big proponent of that, especially keeping things, you know, on a console that doesn't do any alignment on its own, but your trade-off is that you pretty much have the best option out there as far as routing flexibility. So drums is the first one, and then I've got band PMix, which is everything that is basically, so the band and the band PMix all get the same things, which are essentially these 3 subgroups here. So bass, guitars, band all get routed to both of these. The parallel is merely some of the same type things I'm doing parallel pathwise in the drum things. It's just happening at this later stage. And so by doing that on, just kind of offers another level of flavor there, and with the option to kind of go in and utilize that for some added texture and warmth on the overall band things, and just kind of feather it in just to a certain degree. And then the vocals, same type thing. Both of these vocal groups get assigned there, along with all the vocal effects returns. All come back here for the same reason as before, as far as alignment purposes. And then all 4 of these get routed to master bus, which this is what's driving the matrix. Then this guy also hops over here to my last stereo group, which is a record bus. This assigns to that, and I also have the option to be able to bring in crowd mics into this too if I'm using them or running those. That really that's just really nice to be able to do that and have kind of a sort of a pre-baked deal with audience stuff happening in there. You know, if I just want to have something I can pull straight off the desk and not have to do any kind of post editing with, that's kind of a nice feature to have. So that's pretty much what's going on as far as basic inputs, groups, outputs, and then I'm running kind of a plethora of different effects and things like that. So some things are internal to the console, some things are Waves units, and then I've got some others in my little outboard rack over here to my right that I will demonstrate, or I'll, you know, pan over here briefly. So got a few different drum reverbs here, really short mono in, stereo out, just a room. It basically just kind of helps kind of lay down an overall texture and flavor there. RMX16, which is an actual hardware piece that I have in the rack. I'll go over that in a moment. PCM92, it's another hardware piece that's for the more forward, longer affected, very longer tail units. Another hardware piece there. Pardon me. And then we've got a couple of pitch shifter things. So kick snare down, kick snare up, tom down. So these are, we've got 2 monos and then a stereo on the toms, because the toms are going to pan around. But the kick snare, basically that is a way to, I'm using it as a send return. I can basically bring that back in, and that's kind of doing a pitch down effect using Waves torque to do that. And it kind of blends in with the actual dry signal and works out pretty well. Same thing on the up. So the down is pitched down, up is pitched up, and then toms are only pitched down. And then same type thing, you know, send and return. Just some ways to kind of add another little texture that I can bring in on a momentary aspect. BGV verb. So that's the verb that I'm using on the background vocals. I'm actually using the CLA Epic on that. That's an external Waves unit. Pretty nice thing. Really just gives me the option to, you know, because it's a reverb. That's one of the things it does. It's also delay, but it can route delays through reverbs and things. So it gives me another little flavor to have. So more than just a super basic reverb that stays stagnant all the time. There's some options there. Lead vocal verb, that's a hardware unit that I'll touch over in just a moment. And then I've got some delays and some other modulation things happening here. So short delay, a snare delay used for kind of one song right now, doubler, flanger, and those short delay, doubler, flanger. Those are utilized with the lead vocal, and I also have the lead vocals long delay send engine right here, right next to the actual lead vocal input fader. So I do keep that one there just to be able to have some even though I am one that typically manipulates the returns as opposed to the send. I know this is kind of dealer's choice in this realm, but that's usually what I do. But to be able to have this option to be able to manipulate the return, I'm sorry, the send, and just have it close by, I've just kind of put that right there. All right, so that's kind of what's going on. Very, very, fast overview there. Moving over here to some things that are taking place in the analog real world drive rack system here. So some things are very similar. I found things I definitely like quite a bit, and those are kind of kept up with that, and I've added a couple of other pieces here or there. I actually did so the Symphony, Apogee Symphony right there, that I was able to find and add another 8-channel card to that. So I now have 16 by 16 on the analog ins and outs there, and I'll kind of get into what I did with those last 8 channels here in a moment. But for the first 8 channels of that, I'm using, so channel 1 is really these first 4 Neve pieces here in a copper chain. That's the lead vocal chain. So I'm using the Waves software insert on the actual Super Rack host over here, and that is so the software insert as an external insert. I'll just kind of bring it up on that particular channel so that's visible. So before that stuff, I do have the 1176 Waves version, and then that routes directly into this external insert. So that's how I'm getting in and out of this, because the SoundGrid ecosystem speaks directly with the Apogee Symphony SoundGrid enabled converter. So so that's the first channel. So that's these first 4 in a chain. This other piece here is DBX 510. That is their version of, that is the 500 series version of the old DBX subharmonic synth. I was actually, when I first built this rack out, or this particular 500 module piece out, the Neve one here, I was left with one open space and was kind of curious as to what to do with it, and just kind of jokingly put some things up there, and ended up getting a response back from Bruce Ryder, who suggested this unit, and I started using it, and I gotta say, it's really, really fantastic. I use it as another mono send, mono return type of a effects type thing. I basically send it out of a mono out of like an auxiliary on the console, go through that, and I'll send things like kick drum and some floor toms and things like that to it, and then bring it back as a return. And yeah, it's pretty nice and gnarly to be able to have that subharmonic. It seems to really like those transient pieces of information. All right, so next to that, AMS RMX 16500. So this is designed and built up the actual unit itself, the operation and the programs inside it. So definitely patterned after the original 2RU AMS RMX 16 unit. My understanding on this one, the audio, the sounds and the actual programming was ported over from Universal Audio's mod on that, but it is definitely a piece of hardware. It's not a software reverb. And it acts and behaves in terms of its sonic footprint, very, very similar to the original units. There's definitely, it has a little something to it for sure, but something I would say, at least thus far to my experience, it does not seem to share the constantly breaking down aspect, at least in as it would be trying to keep those things working today. But just like the original as well, it's also a mono in stereo out reverb unit hardware. This piece here next to it, I've also had this for a little while. This is the Audified Synergy R1 stereo in, stereo out reverb, and I've been using that on lead vocal reverb primarily because of also it is very much a hardware reverb sound, and it uses it's very easy to go through and just recall some presets, and I have about 6 here that I'll kind of page through depending on the song, and they are very, very quick and easy to recall, and it's also easy to look over and see exactly what I have, and I know what numbers are associated with each thing. So I've got a couple of rooms, a plate, a couple of halls, and then some kind of big long washy ambient thing that for the most part I'm kind of living between a couple of the rooms, plates, and one of the halls, but it is a nice feature and nice flavor to be able to have that as a quickly and easily recallable piece that's that's fast. So that occupies 6 of the 8 available channels on that first I/O card on the Apogee. The last 2 are associated with the Creamliner piece. That's the piece that I've actually had for a little while as well. Still on the left-right master bus. Still, just no matter what I do, not really. I'm not motivated whatsoever to want to try to get rid of this thing or take it away. It's just it's the exact kind of mojo and flavor that I really kind of always wanted, and not really. And yeah, I don't have any need to want to change that. So the next 8 things that I'm doing really have to do with this little radial space heater guy. It's a very interesting little unit. I'm currently running it like a in the mode of it being an 8-channel hardware insert, and each pair essentially has transformers and a tube associated with each stereo pair. So you can engage the transformer, and then you can have some tube saturation associated with that. It's a very it's definitely got a little flavor of its own. I'd say the transformers, they don't get too terribly mushy. The transformer in this can really mush up pretty good. It's got a very, very high nickel content in it. These don't really do that. They still preserve a fair bit of transients. I'm still kind of playing with it a little bit as far as how much the transformers are always going to be on no matter what. What I'm kind of playing with a little bit on it is how much of the tube saturation to use. Speaking specifically to where this falls in the chain, coming back to these stem groups, that's the perfect pairing for that. So that's 8 channels of that with 4 stereo groups. Same thing, these are inserts on that, and then because they actually do also live in the software realm as far as how I actually get those into the console, because it all lives in the Super Rack ecosystem. In addition to having these hardware inserts in line, I'll just call up one of these real quick. So for instance, this is the path for that final drum stem. So I have an EQ here that I'm doing just a little bit of final tailoring, very, very subtle type of work on that, followed by the hardware insert, which is actually where the radial space heater falls in that. So that's how I'm using it right now. I was actually trying an experiment earlier today where because one of the features of the radial and kind of what got me sort of going down this road is because it actually does have a summing mixer. So I actually was trying it just for the sake of basically still using these as hardware inserts, but I actually took the summing mixing portion momentarily. I took it away from the console and was really just trying to use the levels on this, and just took the actual sum out, because in the same way this has, I have these guys that are all assigned to the left, right. I can also sum here to its sum output and then have variable level. Take that, and one of the nice things about this is being able to actually use the merge input function, and I actually did that, tried it. Definitely you know, saved a few converter steps because I actually took the creamliner in line with that and was able to have some really, you know, I was really kind of liking it there for a moment. The only thing I didn't really like is when I do that, that does sort of take my tactile stem final fader. These are pretty much no longer active. You can mute them, you can bring them down. They're not doing anything. All the mixing is taking place at the space heater at that point. One thing I did find out, I don't know, this is just unique to my unit, was when I did do that, I was just going to check my alignment, and I did realize that I've isolated that the output on my particular space heater is exactly 180 degrees out of phase. So, you know, outside of putting, you know, polarity barrels on the outputs, I'm kind of at a loss because I don't find a polarity flip button on this thing at all. So I'm kind of working through that and thinking through it. I've also got a message into Radial Contact to see what kind of insight they have too. But definitely interested in maybe going back that route, because listening to it, I was like, that's pretty interesting. Until then, I'm also still very happy and content to let the desk kind of do its summing and just use the transformers and the tubes as hardware options. So that is kind of what's going on. A lot of things I know I kind of sort of glazed over a little bit, but that is basically what I've got going on now as an overall Digico SD9 and accessories type rig. Hope everybody's doing well and staying as busy as you can and are able and are hanging in there sanity wise. So I will check back in with you, and if I see you, then I'll see you soon. All right, cheers everybody.